The wind moved slowly through the dead metal of the battlefield, where silence lived like a ghost between broken machines and burnt earth. John walked carefully across the dry ground, his boots making soft sounds as they touched the dust. He had been here before many times, always alone, always searching for things to sell or trade. Today felt different. The air was heavy, the sky a strange color, like it knew something was waiting. Stepped over the broken wing of a fallen drone and stopped. His breath caught in his chest. There it was again, a soft sound like a baby crying. John froze and looked around. No animals lived here, not after the war. No humans came here either, only scavengers like him. He listened again. The sound came from under the twisted metal of an alien ship, broken and half buried in the dirt. He moved slowly, his fingers brushing against hot metal still warm from the sun. He pushed a heavy panel aside, and the cry became louder. It was not a human cry. It was not sharp or clear, but soft and strange, like music underwater. John looked inside and saw her, an alien woman. She was covered in blood and dust, her face pale and tired. Her arms shook as she held a small bundle close to her chest. The baby inside was crying, tiny and thin, with skin the color of storm clouds. The alien woman looked up at him, her eyes full of fear and pain. "Please," she said, her voice weak and broken. "I can't feed my child. My milk has dried up. Human, help me." John stepped back, unsure what to do. He had fought her kind before. He had seen them kill his friends. He had lost his wife and child during the war. He had promised himself he would never help an alien again. But the baby cried again, and something inside him moved. Something soft, something he thought was dead. He looked at the woman again. She was shaking, her arms tired. The baby no longer screamed, only whimpered like it was losing strength. He pulled a bottle of water from his pack and handed it to her. She looked at it confused. He opened the cap and poured a little into her mouth. She drank slowly, then gave a few drops to the child. The baby sucked weakly and then cried louder than before. It was not just hunger, it needed food, real food. John looked around. He saw nothing, no help, no supplies, only more wreckage and metal and smoke. He asked her name. She said Zura. She said she was a widow. Her mate had died when the human strike hit their camp. She had run for days with nothing, only her child and her hope. John listened, but said nothing. He watched the baby. It was breathing fast, eyes barely open. Zira spoke again. "You are human, but you are not like the others. You have eyes like a father. My child needs help. He is not part of the war. Please." John sat down, his hands dirty, his face hard. He closed his eyes and saw his own baby, a girl. She had smiled once before the bomb fell. Before the heat took her away, he opened his eyes. Zura was looking at him, her tears dry from too much crying, her voice low, her arms still strong, still holding on. He reached into his bag again, found a protein bar. He broke it into small pieces and handed them to her. She crushed it gently, fed the powder to her child. The baby coughed, then swallowed. The sound it made next was soft, almost a laugh, a tiny sound, but not a cry. Zira looked at John. Her lips trembled. "He will live," she whispered. "Because of you." John looked away. He did not want to feel anything, but he did. He felt the dust in his throat. He felt the silence breaking. He felt the war was still there, but something else was there too. The sun was going down, the sky turning red. He stood up. "We can't stay here," he said. "Drones fly at night. They shoot anything that moves." Asira tried to stand but fell. John reached out and helped her. She was light, too light. He picked up the baby, held it close. It looked at him, its eyes big and full of wonder. John did not speak again. He just started walking. Zura followed, slow and silent. Behind them, the broken ship lay. Still ahead, only more ruins, more danger, more unknown. But now he was not alone. Why would a human help? The wind carried silence. As John walked slowly across the dead fields, holding the alien child close to his chest while Zura followed behind her. Steps weak and uneven, the ground beneath them, dry and broken, as if it had lost all memory of life. Ash floated in the air like snow, but there was no cold, only heat, only the feeling of something lost and never. Returning Zira stumbled again, and John stopped, turned back, reached out his hand without speaking. She took at her fingers, shaking, her eyes filled with a question she did not ask. Why would a human help? John did not answer, not with words. He just pulled her up and began to walk. Again the child made a small sound like a breath catching in its throat, and John looked down, his arms moving carefully to adjust the little bundle. He remembered the weight, not of war, but of his own child years ago, a weight that once brought joy. Before it vanished in fire and dust, Zira looked at him again, her face pale, her lips dry, her voice barely a whisper. You lost someone, I can see it in your eyes. John did not look at her, but he heard her. He heard the echo of something buried beneath. Anger and silence and pain. He saw flashes in his mind. The house, the laughter, the child's laughter, and then the silence, the empty crib, the burned walls. The photo buried in ash. He kept walking, because stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant breaking. Zira pointed toward a distant hill. There was shelter there, a cave, old but safe. No machines scanned that far. We can rest, I can try to feed him again. John nodded once and changed direction, his steps steady but slow, his eyes watching the sky. No drones yet, but night was close, and night brought worse than drones. Shadows, creatures from both sides. The war had left behind more than ruins. They reached the cave. It was hidden behind stone and dry roots. Inside it was dark and cool. The air smelled of earth and old rain. Zira sat down against the wall, holding her child close. She tried to nurse, but the baby turned its head and whimpered weakly. She looked at John with sorrow, not fear, just sorrow, like a mother who had nothing left to give. John opened his pack again. He had one more protein bar, some dried fruit, a water bottle half full. He crushed the fruit into pulp and gave it to Zira. She dipped her finger and let the child taste. The baby made a soft sound, then sucked. A little more life returning bit by bit. John sat across from them, his back against stone. He watched, quiet, tired, still thinking why help? Why carry this burden when it was not his? But the answer came without words. The answer was in the way the child gripped his finger, in the way Zira looked at him, not as an enemy, but as something more, not quite a friend. Not yet, but more than a stranger. Zira whispered again, in my world, fathers carry the soul of the home. When they fall, the sky breaks. But you walk like one who still holds the sky. John did not know what to say, so he said nothing. Outside the cave, night had arrived without sound. The stars above were strange, not like Earth, colder, farther, but somehow they still watched. Zira leaned her head back, her eyes closing slowly. You do not speak much. That is good. Words can be sharp, but silence can hold more. Thank you, human. Or should I call you something else? John looked at the child sleeping now, the tiny chest rising and falling gently. He said, my name is John. Zira smiled weakly. John, your name means grace in my tongue. He looked away. He did not feel like grace. He felt like a shadow. A man who had lost too much and found something he did not ask for. Zira was asleep now, the child too. Only John remained awake, his eyes on the cave mouth. He held a metal piece in his hand, a sharp shard from a drone blade. He would not sleep. Not tonight. Something moved outside, far away, a soft rumble, not thunder, not natural. John knew that sound. A hover scan machine, still hunted even after war. Even after peace was signed by diplomats who never saw blood in the dirt. Pulled the child close, wrapped it in extra cloth. He looked at Zira, still breathing. Still alive, he thought again. Why help? Because no one helped him when he needed it most. Because no child should cry alone. Because even in the ashes something human must remain. He closed his eyes just for a second, not to sleep, just to remember. And in that second, for the first time in years, he did not feel alone, hunted by machines. The wind had changed again, moving with a whisper, like it was warning them of something coming from beyond the hills. Something cold, something watching. John stood outside the cave, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon where lights blinked in the sky, not stars, but something else, something made by humans, but no longer controlled by them. Zira remained inside, her arms wrapped around the sleeping child. Her breath slow and calm, though her heart knew the storm was near. She had seen this before, the silence before the scan, the still air before the hunt. John had heard it too long ago. During the last phase of the war, when machines were sent without names or faces, just missions. Seek. Scan, eliminate. He picked up a small mirror shard and caught the faint reflection of silver wings sweeping the sky just above the trees near the valley edge. Drones, not many, 2, maybe 3, but fast, smart, hungry for signals movement. He moved back inside the cave quickly and knelt near Zura. They are here, he whispered. She opened her eyes slowly, the fear returning like an old friend, unwelcome but familiar. Her hand tightened on the cloth around her child. We must go now, John said softly. Not with panic, but with purpose. Zura nodded. Her legs shook as she stood, but she stood. She would always stand if her child needed her. John wrapped the child in a dark cloth to hide heat signals and handed it gently to Zura. She took him close to her chest, her head bowed as if praying. Though her gods lived on another world, too far to hear, they left the cave and entered the broken woods where the trees had no leaves and the ground was marked with old tracks burned deep by fire years ago. They moved slow, careful, quiet, every step measured, every breath controlled above. Then the sky grew brighter, not with sunlight, but with artificial beams slicing through the night, scanning always. Scanning, John led them through the wreckage of what once had been a forward base, its walls fallen, its systems cold. He remembered this place. He had fought here. He had bled here. Now he was hiding from the very machines his own people had sent. A branch snapped behind them. John turned. Nothing, then a low hum like metal breathing. He pushed Zura down behind a metal slab. He covered her with parts and wires, made to look like wreckage. Stay here, he whispered. Protect him. She looked at him with wide eyes. Where will you go? John did not answer. He ran through the ruins, making noise, throwing pieces of metal, creating movement. The scan beam turned. The drones shifted. They had seen him. John ran faster, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. Every second he lived was a second Zura and her child could stay hidden. He reached a large fuel tank, broken, but not empty. He pulled a wire from his pack, sparked it with a power cell, and threw it into the leaking tank. The explosion was small enough. The fire rose into the air, heat and light breaking through the darkness. The drones followed. John dropped flat into a trench, his body still, his mouth tasting ash. He waited. One drone passed over him, its lens blinking, scanning. Then it turned, followed the fire, left. Silence again. Real silence, not safety, but something close. He crawled back through the ruins, blood on his arm from a cut he had not noticed. When he found the hiding spot, Zura was still there, her eyes filled with water, not from fear, from seeing him return. You should not have done that, she whispered. John looked at her. It is not about should. It is about must. They moved again under the cloak of smoke now rising from the burned fuel. It would confuse the drones for a while, give them minutes, maybe hours, enough to reach the next place. A broken tunnel hidden under the ground. John remembered it from maps years ago, an old maintenance route once used to carry supplies, now just dust and dark and silence. They climbed down one by one, Zura first with the child. John last, sealing the entrance with old metal and stone inside the tunnel. It was cold, damp, dark, but they were not in the sky anymore. Not in the scanners, not in the war. For a while, they could breathe. Zura sat again, her back to the wall, her child close to her chest. He was quiet now, eyes open, small fingers moving in the air, like he was dreaming of stars. Sat near the corner, checking his arm. The cut was deep, but not deadly. Pain was just a sound the body made. He had stopped listening to it long ago. Zura spoke softly. You ran for us. You burned for us. Why? John looked at the child, then at her. He spoke with no anger. Because I saw him, my son, in your arms. Zura's eyes filled with a light, not of her planet, not of her kind. A light born of understanding. For the first time she smiled, and in the dark of the forgotten tunnel, a human and an alien widow sat together, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something new, something the machines could never scan, something the war could never break, something like hope, the alien hunger, The tunnel stretched into darkness like the throat of a dead world, where every sound felt heavy and every breath echoed against stone and silence. John moved with quiet steps, his eyes scanning the walls as if expecting them to speak. Behind him Zura followed, holding her child close, wrapped in a thin cloth, the color of ash. The baby had not cried in hours, and that silence made John more afraid than any scream. They stopped near a broken pipe where water dripped slowly, forming a shallow pool on the ground. Zura knelt beside it, dipped her fingers into the water, then touched it to the baby's lips. The child moved slightly, tried to drink, then turned away weak, and Turajira looked up at John, her voice barely a whisper. He needs food, not just water. His body is different. He cannot survive on human rations. We need Nira fruit. It is the only thing his stomach can take now. John nodded. Though he had never heard of such a fruit, he asked where to find it. Zura pointed to the far end of the tunnel, where faint green light pulsed like breath, beyond the cracks in the stone. It grows in the dead zone, she said, a place the war changed. Once it was forest, now it is a grave of things that still move even after dying. But the fruit survives, small glowing pods growing near roots of twisted trees. Dangerous but alive. John stood without speaking, checked the knife at his belt, the wire coil in his pack, the small flare in his hand. He looked at the baby again, its eyes open but unfocused, its lips dry. No more waiting. Stay here, he said to Zura. Block the tunnel after me. Do not make sound. If I do not return in 2 hours, take the child and keep moving. Zura's hand touched his arm for a moment, not pulling, not holding, just saying something without words. John stepped into the crack where green light bled through and vanished from sight. The dead zone was not like anything he had seen. Trees that looked like bones reached into the sky, their branches curling like fingers. The ground moved in places as if breathing. Mist crawled across the roots, carrying smells of metal rot and strange flowers. John walked slowly, careful to avoid noise, careful to not touch anything alive. He saw a nest made of wires and bone inside it, a creature with eyes like red glass, but no face. It did not move as he passed, it only watched. He found the fruit near the center of a fallen tree, where thick roots wrapped around each other like snakes. Small glowing pods grew from the cracks, soft, pulsing with gentle light. He reached out and touched one, warm, alive. He pulled 3 from the tree, wrapped them in cloth, and turned to leave. Then the air shifted, a sound behind him, low, clicking like teeth on stone. He turned slowly, saw a shape in the mist. Tall, thin, not human, not machine. It moved without sound, its arms long and bent backwards, its face covered in plates of metal grown into skin. It did not run. It did not speak. It began to follow. John stepped back slowly, then turned and ran. He knew the tunnels were close. He just needed seconds, not minutes. The mist chased him, the air filled with that sound again, clicking, tapping, hungry. Slid through the crack in the stone. Just as the shape reached the edge, it stopped, looked at him through the gap, then stepped back and vanished into the fog, like it had never been there. John sealed the stone with an old pipe, blocked it with wire and metal, his hands shaking, his breath hard. When he returned to the dark place where Zura waited, she stood quickly, her eyes wide. He handed her the fruit without speaking. She crushed a small piece in her hand, fed the juice to her child, dropped by. Minutes passed. Then a sound, a tiny voice. The baby made a soft chirping noise. Then another, its mouth moving slowly, its fingers grasping at the cloth. It was eating. Zura began to cry, not from fear, not from pain, from something else. Relief. John sat back against the wall, his arm still bleeding, his clothes wet with mist. He looked at the tunnel ceiling, counted each breath, like it was a gift. Zura whispered thank you again and again, like it was a prayer. John closed his eyes for a moment. Saw fire again. He saw his old home. He saw his daughter smile. And for the first time it did not hurt. Outside, the dead zone returned to silence. The trees stopped moving. The mist faded, but deep in the roots, something still waited. Something that had seen John, something that had followed, and now remembered his face. Air inside the tunnel had grown colder, as if something unseen had passed. Through carrying silence like a cloak, John sat alone near the entrance, his knife resting across his lap while his eyes stayed open and fixed on the shadows. Zura had fallen asleep, holding her child close, the glow from the alien fruit still faintly shining across her hands. The child now breathing with strength again, his small fingers curled. Into sleep without fear. John kept his mind still, but his heart moved restlessly. He had left his world to escape, not to rescue. He had survived the war, but not escaped its noise, and yet here he was choosing again. Zira stirred her eyes, opening slowly, searching for him across the dim light of the tunnel. She sat up, her body tired, but stronger than before, her voice low and steady. "We cannot stay here much longer. The drones will scan this section by morning. If they find us, they will not ask who we are." John nodded slowly, his hands tightening around the edge of his coat. "Where will you go?" Zira looked toward the far wall where a small path led deeper underground. "There's a hidden route left by my people before the war. It connects to a refugee chamber far below the surface. Many of my kind are gathering there to wait for a ship. It is the last escape off this planet." John stared at her without blinking. "You have a way off this world?" Zira nodded. "But the route is old and broken, and guarded by watchers left behind during the last wave. We cannot make it alone, not with the child. We need help to pass." She looked at him then, not as a soldier, not as a human, but as something else, something rare. She said, "Come with us. You are one of us now, whether you choose to be or not." John felt something twist inside his chest, a choice he had buried, one he never thought he would need to make again. He had no family left, no future on Earth, no place in the cities that blamed him for surviving while others died. But this alien child, this broken mother, this strange world, it had become something more than a mission. Still he asked, "What happens if I go with you?" Zira answered, "You will live among us. You will not be safe, but you will be accepted. My child will know your name. He already knows your voice. He sleeps when you speak. He smiles when you carry him." John looked at the baby, the small face now peaceful, the rise and fall of his chest like music in the silence. "And if I stay?" he asked. "If I return to the surface? If I go back to the outpost?" Zira's voice grew quiet. "They will not welcome you. You are marked now. You helped the enemy. You carried an alien child. They will not forgive that." John leaned back against the cold wall, the stone pressing into his shoulders like the weight of the decision itself. Closed his eyes and saw the face of his daughter once again, her smile, her small hand. Then the fire, the silence, the end. He opened his eyes and looked at Zira. "You said the route is broken. How dangerous?" she replied. "It will take a full day through tunnels filled with traps and blind machines. Some speak of strange lights. Some say the watchers are no longer machines but something else." John stood slowly. He picked up his pack, checked the flare, wrapped a cloth around his hand. Then he said, "Let's go." Zira's face did not smile, but her eyes did. She lifted the child gently and placed him into the sling across her shoulder. The child stirred but did not cry. They moved together into the deeper path where old lights flickered and the walls dripped with strange liquid. John walked ahead, knife in hand, while Zira followed his steps exactly behind them. The tunnel collapsed from old age, sealing the way back. The choice had been made as they walked. John heard whispers from the shadows, not voices but memories. He saw shapes inside the stone. Old helmets, faded flags, bones. He did not stop. Every hour they moved slower. Every step felt longer. Twice they had to crawl through narrow spaces. Once John had to fight a creature with no eyes and too many arms. It bled smoke and vanished into the cracks, but they kept moving together. When they reached the final chamber, it opened into a wide dome carved into the rock. Lights glowed from the walls. Alien symbols danced across the ceiling, and faces appeared from the dark. Zira stepped forward and spoke in her language. The others listened, then nodded. One touched John's shoulder. He did not speak, but his hand stayed there for a long time. John looked around and for the first time saw more than just survival. He saw a new beginning. Child in Zira's arms looked at him, reached out, touched his face, and John, for the first time in years, smiled. Attack at dusk. The sky above the broken hills turned orange as the last light of the sun fell across the dead fields like blood on rusted stone. John stood near the edge of the underground chamber, his eyes watching the shadows grow longer while his hands rested on the knife tied to his belt. He could feel it in the wind, something coming, something close inside. The dome the refugees moved, silently packing their few supplies, wrapping cloth. Around the children, checking the old map carved into the stone, Zara stood near the center, her child asleep in the sling across her chest. Her face calm, but her breath short. She looked at John and he nodded. Once he had seen war before. He knew. When it was near, one of the scouts returned from the tunnel, his skin cut by shrapnel, his eyes wide with fear. "They are coming," he said. "Human machines, 6 maybe more, flying low, armed. They know we are here." The chamber fell into a silence heavier than stone. No screams, no panic, just stillness. Then a voice from the far side spoke, an elder with metal threads across her skin. "They have come to finish what they started. We are not soldiers. We cannot fight." Another voice. "You brought a human among us." They followed him. "This is the price of his kindness." John stepped forward. He did not argue. He did not speak in defense. He simply said, "I will lead them away." Zira turned quickly. "No, you cannot. You are one man. They will kill you." John looked at the child. In her arms, the baby opened his eyes, looked at him, made a soft sound. Not fear, not pain, just trust. "Turn to the group. You have a chance. There's a tunnel on the western side. It leads to the ridge above the canyon. From there you can reach the escape field. Your ship will find you if you reach the beacon." One of the younger aliens stepped forward. "But the machines will block the path. Not if they follow me," John said. "I know how they think. I trained them before they turned. I can keep them chasing me until you are clear." Zira's hands shook. "You already gave too much. Why more? Why now?" John looked at her. "Because the war was never about who wins. It was about who remembers how to save something worth keeping." He stepped into the open tunnel. The metal in his pack rattled as he walked. He set the small explosive charges along the walls. Just enough to make noise, not to kill. Enough to light a false path behind him. The refugees began to move, slow at first, then faster, each step toward freedom. Marked by his footsteps away from it, as he reached the surface, the sky had deepened into dusk, the sun bleeding its last breath across the clouds. He saw them, 6 machines hovering above the far ridge, scanning, waiting. He pulled the flare from his belt, lit it with a spark, threw it into the open. It screamed as it flew, a red light, a cry of defiance. The machines turned. One scanned him, then they moved fast, silent, lethal. John ran through the old trenches, past bones, past old banners buried in dust. His heart steady, his breath sharp, each step a promise kept. The machines followed, guns ready, lenses glowing. He reached the cliff near the southern edge. There he stopped, turned, faced them. One hovered close, its voice cold. "You are a traitor to your kind." John smiled without joy. "No, I remembered what kind means." He pulled the final wire from his belt, connected it to the charge behind him. The machine scanned, warning danger. He stepped back, the cliff edge crumbled. The machine moved in. John jumped. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun. Dust rose, fire followed, metal screamed. When silence returned, there was nothing left but wind far away across the canyon. Zira stood on the ridge, her child in her arms, the others behind her. She watched the smoke rise. Her eyes did not blink, her breath held inside her chest. Then the beacon lit. The signal reached the sky in the silence of dusk. The ship began its descent. Zira looked down at her child. He looked up at her, then looked at the sky, as if he knew. She whispered his name was John. He was human, but more than human, and now he is part of us.